Unprepared for Deathworlders. The sleek Nebulox transport ship glided into the docking bay of the renowned Galactic Academy for Extreme Survival, GAXS. As the airlock hissed open, 5 figures emerged, their silhouettes distinctly different from the usual array of alien species that graced the Academy's halls. Professor Xyloth Krenks, a tall, slender being with iridescent purple skin and 3 eyes that swiveled independently, watched the new arrivals with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. His colleague, Professor Crixia Firm, a stout, fuzzy creature with 4 arms and a trumpet-like proboscis, stood beside him, her antennae twitching in agitation. Humans, Crixia buzzed, her voice tinged with disbelief. I can't fathom what the admissions board was thinking, allowing Deathworlders into our esteemed program. Xyloth nodded, his eyes narrowing as he appraised the 5 humans approaching them. They looked so soft, so fragile, compared to the usual hardy specimens that enrolled in the academy. I'd give them a week, tops, he muttered. As the humans drew closer, Xyloth and Crixia put on their most welcoming expressions. Greetings and welcome to GAXS, Xyloth said, his voice resonating with practiced authority. I am Professor Xyloth Krenks, and this is my colleague, Professor Crixia Firm. We will be your primary instructors during your time here. The tallest of the humans, a male with a shock of unruly dark hair and piercing green eyes, stepped forward and extended his hand. Captain Jack Sterling, United Earth Space Corps, he said, his voice confident and steady. This is my team. Lieutenant Mira Solaris, Sergeant Raven Ironheart, Corporal Zeke Blaze, and Private Area Nova. We're honored to be here. Professor Crixia regarded the proffered hand with a mix of confusion and distaste before hesitantly extending one of her 4 appendages to mimic the gesture. Yes, well, we shall see how long that enthusiasm lasts, she buzzed. The trials that await you are unlike anything you've encountered on your homeworld. Area, the youngest of the group, with fiery red hair and a smattering of freckles across her nose, grinned widely. With all due respect, Professor, we're Deathworlders. We're pretty used to facing the impossible. Xyloth's eyebrows rose at the bold statement. Indeed. Well, we have quite the orientation prepared for you. If you'll follow us, we'll begin by assessing your baseline survival skills. As the group made their way through the winding corridors of the academy, Xyloth and Crixia couldn't help but notice the curious stares and hushed whispers from the other alien students they passed. It was clear that the humans' presence had caused quite a stir. The orientation chamber was a cavernous room filled with all manner of bizarre and intimidating equipment. Holographic displays flickered with scenes of raging infernos, tumultuous seas, and the yawning void of space. The humans, however, seemed more excited than daunted by the sight. All right, let's see what you've got, Jack said, rubbing his hands together in anticipation. Over the next several hours, the humans underwent a grueling series of tests designed to push them to their limits. They scaled towering cliff faces, navigated treacherous swamps, and even faced down a pack of snarling, genetically engineered predators. To Xyloth and Crixia's amazement, the humans not only survived but thrived. They worked seamlessly as a team, their movements fluid and precise, their communication effortless. Even more impressive was their ability to adapt and improvise on the fly. When faced with a seemingly impassable ravine, Raven produced a grappling hook from her pack and swung the team across with ease. When confronted with a lock that would have stymied most species, Zeke had it picked in a matter of seconds. And when Aria found herself face to face with the venomous serpent, she calmly retrieved an antivenom kit from her belt and administered it without hesitation. As the orientation drew to a close, Xyloth and Crixia found themselves re-evaluating their initial assumptions about the humans. Perhaps there was more to these Deathworlders than met the eye. Impressive, Xyloth admitted grudgingly as the humans regrouped, their faces flushed with exertion but their eyes bright with triumph. But don't get cocky. The real challenges are yet to come. Jax flashed a grin, his teeth startlingly white against his tanned skin. "Bring it on, Professor. We're just getting started." As the humans filed out of the orientation chamber, chatting animatedly amongst themselves, Scyloth turned to Crixia with a thoughtful expression. "I have a feeling this is going to be a very interesting semester," he murmured. Crixia's antennae twitched in agreement. "Indeed," she buzzed. "I just hope the Academy survives the experience." Trial by fire. The first true test for the human cadets came in the form of the Nebula Navigation Challenge. The objective was simple: navigate a small spacecraft through a treacherous stretch of the Sicilian Nebula, a swirling mass of gas, dust, and ionized particles that wreaked havoc on sensors and shields alike. "Remember," Professor Zyloff instructed as the teams prepared to embark, "this is not a race. The goal is to make it through the nebula intact, not to be the first across the finish line." Jax and his team exchanged knowing looks. They had spent the previous night poring over star charts and running simulations, devising strategies to overcome the nebula's many hazards. As the countdown commenced, the human team's craft, the Resilience, hummed to life. Mira, the team's pilot, flexed her fingers over the controls, her eyes narrowing in concentration. The moment the signal was given, the Resilience surged forward, plunging into the swirling miasma of the nebula. Almost immediately, the craft was buffeted by electromagnetic turbulence, the view screen flickering with static. "Raven, status report," Jax barked, bracing himself against a bulkhead as the ship shuddered around them. "Shields holding at 70%. Raven replied, her fingers flying over her console. "Navigational sensors are degraded, but still functional. Wait, I'm detecting an anomaly up ahead." The view screen cleared just in time to reveal a massive, jagged chunk of space debris hurtling towards them. Mira reacted instantly, sending the Resilience into a dizzying spiral to avoid the collision. "Nice moves," Zeke commented from his position at the weapons console. "But we're not out of the woods yet. I'm picking up multiple bogies on the scope." The bogies turned out to be a swarm of tiny crystalline organisms that inhabited the nebula. Drawn to the Resilience's energy emissions, they began to latch onto the hull, their razor-sharp edges scoring deep gouges in the ship's armor. "We need to shake them off before they breach the hull," Aria said, her brow furrowed in concentration as she scanned the readouts from her science station. Jax nodded, an idea forming in his mind. "Zeke, can you modify the shield harmonics to emit a resonant pulse?" Zeke grinned. "I like the way you think, Cap. One sonic bug zapper, coming right up." Moments later, the Resilience shuddered as a pulse of energy rippled out from its shields. The crystalline creatures shattered like glass, their fragments drifting harmlessly away into the nebula. As the team navigated deeper into the nebula, they encountered a dizzying array of hazards, from gravitational anomalies that threatened to tear the ship apart, to pockets of highly corrosive gas that ate away at their shields. Throughout it all, the humans remained cool and focused, their training and ingenuity allowing them to overcome each new challenge. They worked seamlessly as a unit, anticipating each other's needs and actions with almost uncanny precision. In the observation room back at the Academy, Professor Zyloff and Crixia watched in astonishment as the Resilience emerged from the far side of the nebula, battered but intact. They had expected the humans to struggle, perhaps even to fail. Instead, they had completed the challenge in record time, and with a level of skill that put many of their alien counterparts to shame. "Extraordinary," Crixia buzzed, her compound eyes wide with wonder. "I've never seen anything like it." Zyloff nodded, his own expression one of begrudging admiration. "It seems we may have underestimated our human cadets," he mused. "I'm beginning to understand why their species has earned such a fearsome reputation." As the Resilience docked back at the Academy, Jax and his team disembarked to a hero's welcome. Their fellow cadets, who had watched their progress with a mix of awe and envy, crowded around to offer their congratulations and pepper them with questions. Amidst the chaos, Jax caught sight of Xyloth and Crexia observing from a distance. He met their gaze, a small, satisfied smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. They had passed their first trial by fire. But as Jax well knew, in the unforgiving depths of space, the real challenges were only just beginning. Ingenuity under pressure. The gauntlet of 1,000 perils. The name alone was enough to strike fear into the hearts of even the most seasoned cadets at the Galactic Academy. A sprawling labyrinthine course, filled with every conceivable hazard, from raging rivers of lava to fields of razor-sharp thorns to chambers filled with noxious gas. It was the ultimate test of a cadet's survival skills and mental fortitude. As Jax and his team stood at the entrance to the gauntlet, their expressions were grim but determined. They had spent the past week preparing for this moment, studying the layout of the course, memorizing the locations of key resources, and honing their skills in the Academy's simulation chambers. "Remember," Jax said, his voice low and intense, "we stick together, no matter what. We're a team, and we're going to beat this thing as a team." The others nodded, their faces set with resolve. They knew the stakes. Only a handful of cadets had ever completed the gauntlet, and those who failed often paid with their lives. As the signal to begin sounded, the team plunged into the gauntlet. Almost immediately, they were beset by a horde of vicious, insectoid creatures that swarmed out of the shadows, their razor-sharp mandibles snapping at the humans' armored suits. Zeke and Raven reacted instantly, their weapons blazing to life as they cut a path through the chittering swarm. Arya, meanwhile, had spotted a narrow passageway off to one side and was already motioning for the others to follow her. The passageway led to a small, dimly lit chamber. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, atop which rested a small, glowing orb. "It's a beacon," Arya said, scanning the orb with her Omni tool. "If we can activate it, it should reveal the location of the next checkpoint." But as Mira reached out to take the orb, a hidden panel in the floor opened up, revealing a yawning chasm filled with churning, noxious-looking liquid. "Acid," Jax said grimly. "One touch of that stuff, and our suits will dissolve like tissue paper." For a moment, the team exchanged desperate looks. Then Raven's eyes lit up with sudden inspiration. "The grappling hooks," she said. "We can use them to swing across the chasm and grab the orb." It was a risky plan, but it was the only one they had. With careful aim, Raven fired her grappling hook at the far wall, the metallic cable singing as it cut through the air. One by one, the others followed suit, until all 5 of them were dangling precariously over the churning acid. Inch by painstaking inch, they made their way across the chasm, their hearts pounding in their chests as the acid hissed and bubbled beneath them. Finally, Arya was able to snag the orb, tucking it safely into a compartment on her suit. As they swung back to safety, the humans allowed themselves a brief moment of celebration. But they knew it was only the beginning. The gauntlet had many more horrors in store. Over the next several hours, the team faced down a dizzying array of challenges. They navigated a field of geysers that spouted scalding steam, using their suits' cooling systems to regulate their body temperature. They hacked their way through a dense jungle filled with carnivorous plants, using misheats fashioned from the bones of long-dead creatures. They even fashioned a makeshift raft to cross a river of molten lava, using their suits' force fields to shield them from the searing heat. Through it all, they relied on their training, their ingenuity, and their unbreakable bond as a team. They encouraged each other through the toughest moments, sharing rations and water, tending to each other's injuries, and even cracking jokes to keep their spirits up. As they emerged from the final chamber of the gauntlet, battered, bruised, but victorious, they were greeted by a stunned Xyloth and Crexia. "Incredible," Crexia buzzed, her antennae quivering with amazement. "In all my years of teaching, I've never seen a team perform so well." Xyloth, too, was visibly impressed. "Your resourcefulness and adaptability are truly remarkable," he said. "You've set a new standard for what is possible in the gauntlet." Jax grinned, clapping his teammates on the back. "I told you," he said, his voice filled with pride. "Deathworlders, we don't know the meaning of the word quit." As the adrenaline of the gauntlet began to wear off, the humans found themselves surrounded by their fellow cadets, all eager to hear about their experiences. They regaled them with tales of narrow escapes and ingenious solutions, and soon the human team had become the talk of the academy. But even as they basked in their newfound celebrity, Jax and his team knew that their greatest challenge still lay ahead. The final exam, a 2-week survival mission on a remote hostile world, loomed on the horizon. They had proven their mettle in the controlled environment of the academy. But how would they fare when faced with the raw, unforgiving brutality of a true death world? Only time would tell. Crixel 7, a name that struck fear into the hearts of even the most hardened explorers and xenobiologists. A death world in every sense of the word, with an atmosphere thick with toxic gases, a surface crawling with predatory megafauna, and a climate that veered wildly between searing heat and bone-chilling cold. It was here, on this nightmarish planet, that the final exam would take place. The Crixel 7, a name that struck fear into the hearts of even the most hardened explorers and xenobiologists. A death world in every sense of the word, with an atmosphere thick with toxic gases, a surface crawling with predatory megafauna, and a climate that veered wildly between searing heat and bone-chilling cold. It was here, on this nightmarish planet, that the final exam would take place. The objective was simple: survive for 2 weeks, using only the limited supplies and equipment provided. No outside assistance, no rescue if things went wrong. It was the ultimate test of a cadet's training and resolve. As Jax and his team stood on the landing pad, watching as the shuttle that had brought them vanished into the sickly green sky, they felt a sense of trepidation settle over them. They had faced challenges before, but nothing like this. "All right, team," Jax said, his voice steady despite the knot of fear in his gut. "First things first, we need to find shelter, and then start working on a plan to secure food and water." They set off across the rugged, broken terrain, their suits' environmental systems working overtime to filter out the toxic atmosphere. The landscape was a nightmare of jagged rocks, bubbling tar pits, and twisted alien vegetation that seemed to writhe and pulse with a life of its own. They had been hiking for less than an hour when they encountered their first threat, a massive, serpentine creature, its body covered in razor-sharp spines, burst from the ground directly in front of them, its jaws gaping wide to reveal rows of needle-like teeth. Zeke reacted instantly, his plasma rifle already in his hands. He fired off a series of rapid shots, the searing bolts of energy slicing through the creature's thick hide. It let out a deafening shriek, thrashing in agony, but still it came on, driven by an insatiable hunger. It took the combined firepower of the entire team to bring the beast down, and even then, they were left shaken and winded by the encounter. It was a stark reminder of the dangers they faced, and of how quickly things could go wrong on a world like Crixel 7. As the days passed, the team fell into a grim routine of survival. They fortified a small cave system to serve as their base camp, setting up perimeter defenses and traps to ward off the planet's predators. They ventured out in cautious forays to gather what meager food and water they could find, always on high alert for the next attack. But despite their best efforts, the toll of the planet began to wear on them. The constant strain of the toxic atmosphere, the unrelenting heat and cold, and the ever-present threat of the wildlife all conspired to sap their strength and their resolve. It was on the 10th day, when their supplies were running low and their spirits were at their nadir, that disaster struck. Arya, who had been out on a solo scouting mission, stumbled back into camp, her suit torn and her face pale with shock. "Reavers," she gasped, collapsing into Jax's arms. "A whole pack of them, headed straight for us." Reavers, the name sent a chill down the spines of every member of the team. They were Crixel 7's apex predators, massive feline-like creatures with hides like armor and claws like scythes. They were known to hunt in packs and to show no fear in the face of even the most heavily armed opponents. Jax knew they had only one chance. They had to make a stand, here and now, or they would be overwhelmed and torn to pieces. They hastily fortified their position, setting up barricades and laying down fields of fire. They checked and rechecked their weapons, knowing that every shot would have to count. When the Reavers came, it was like a nightmare made flesh. A tide of snarling, leaping bodies, their eyes glowing with a feral, predatory intelligence. The team opened fire, their weapons chattering and barking as they poured a withering hail of plasma and kinetic rounds into the onrushing horde. But for every Reaver that fell, two more seemed to take its place. They closed the distance with terrifying speed, their claws raking at the team's defenses, their jaws snapping at any exposed limb or vulnerable spot. In the chaos of the battle, Jax saw Mira go down, a Reaver's claw shearing through her suit and into the flesh beneath. He saw Raven, her face a mask of grim determination as she stood over her fallen comrade, her weapon blazing as she held the creatures at bay. And then, just when all seemed lost, he heard it, the deep, throaty roar of an approaching ship's engines. He looked up to see a massive, heavily armed shuttle descending from the sky, its weapons already spitting fire into the Reaver pack. It was Xyloth and Crixia, come to extract their students from the jaws of certain death. The shuttle's weapons scythed through the Reavers, scattering and confusing them long enough for the team to scramble aboard. As they lifted off, leaving the nightmare of Crixol 7 behind, Jax looked around at his battered, bleeding, but unbroken team. They had faced the unthinkable, and they had survived. They were Deathworlders, and they had proven their mettle on the most hostile of stages. But even as relief and pride surged through him, Jax knew that their journey was far from over. They had passed the test, but the real challenges, the challenges of leadership, of responsibility, of carving out a place for humanity on the galactic stage, were only just beginning. He glanced out the viewport at the receding form of Crixol 7, a world that would forever haunt his dreams, but that had also forged him and his team into something more than they had been. They were the vanguard, the first of their kind to walk this path. And as he watched the stars wheel overhead, Jax knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as they always had, together, as a team, as Deathworlders united. Deathworlders' legacy. The return to the Galactic Academy was a somber affair, marked by a profound sense of relief, tinged with the bittersweet knowledge of what had been endured and what had been lost. Jax and his team had emerged from the crucible of Crixol 7 change, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally as well. They had stared into the abyss, had come face to face with the pitiless indifference of the universe, and had emerged, if not unscathed, then at least unbowed. As they disembarked from the shuttle, they were met by a crowd of their fellow cadets, their faces a mix of awe, respect, and a hint of fear. Word of their exploits had spread, and they were now regarded as something more than mere students. They were survivors, warriors, legends in the making. But for Jax and his team, the accolades and the admiration were secondary. What mattered was the bond they had forged, the unbreakable ties of loyalty and sacrifice that had seen them through the darkest of times. In the days that followed, they were debriefed exhaustively by the Academy staff, their every action and decision dissected and analyzed. But through it all, Xyloth and Crixia remained a constant presence, their initial skepticism and doubt now replaced by a profound respect and even a hint of affection. "You have shown us something we never thought possible," Xyloth said, his voice thick with emotion. "You have shown us the true strength and resilience of the human spirit. And for that, we are forever in your debt." For Jax and his team, the words were a validation of all they had endured, a recognition of the sacrifices they had made. But they knew that their journey was only beginning. In the weeks and months that followed, they threw themselves into their studies with a newfound intensity, driven by a burning desire to make a difference, to leave their mark on the galaxy. They worked closely with their alien classmates, sharing their knowledge and experience, forging bonds of friendship and understanding that transcended species and culture. They became leaders and mentors, guiding and inspiring those around them. And as they prepared to graduate, to take their place among the ranks of the galaxy's elite, they knew that they carried with them a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. For they were Deathworlders, the first of their kind to walk the halls of the Galactic Academy. And in the years to come, their example would serve as a beacon, a guiding light for all those who aspired to push the boundaries of what was possible. As they stood on the stage, accepting their commissions and their awards, Jax looked out over the sea of faces, alien and human alike, and felt a swell of pride and humility. "Today, we stand on the threshold of a new era," he said, his voice ringing out clear and strong. "An era in which the boundaries between species and cultures will be broken down, in which the strength and courage of all sentient beings will be recognized and celebrated. We are the vanguard of that era, the ones who will lead the way. And though the path ahead may be fraught with danger and uncertainty, we will face it as we always have, together, united in our diversity, in our common hopes and dreams. For we are Deathworlders, and we do not know the meaning of the word impossible." As the crowd erupted in cheers and applause, Jax looked to his team, to the alien friends and mentors who had stood by them through it all, and he knew that, whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them head-on, with courage, determination, and an unbreakable spirit. For they were the inheritors of a legacy of resilience, of adaptability, of indomitable will. They were the future, and the future was theirs to shape. As Xyloth and Crexio watched their students, their pride and admiration was palpable. They had begun this journey as teachers, as guardians and guides, but they had ended it as something more, as friends, as allies, as fellow travelers on the great cosmic journey. "They will change the galaxy," Crixia said softly, her eyes glistening with emotion, "and we will have had a hand in shaping that change." Xyloth nodded, his own heart full to bursting. "Indeed," he said, "indeed we will have. And I can think of no greater honor, no greater privilege than that." And as the ceremony ended, as the newly minted officers and agents dispersed to their new assignments and adventures, a sense of hope and possibility hung in the air. A sense that whatever the future held, it would be a future shaped by the courage, the compassion, and the indomitable spirit of the Deathworlders.